So many people want to be an expert, but on this podcast, we're going to talk about how to become an influential expert in your field. Come listen.
Welcome to the Behind Her Brand podcast with your host, Kimberly Spencer. Every week, join Kimberly and her guest for inspiring interviews with passionate business builders, corporate leaders, and catalysts of change. Plus, we will be sharing business and career building strategies and tools that you can use to grow. So let's dive into today's episode.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of our Behind Her Brand podcast. I am your host, Kimberly DeShields-Spencer. And today I'm going to challenge you right off the bat. Take out a pen, paper, Post-it notes, whatever it is that you can write down. I want you to write down some of the things I'm going to be asking you so that you can work on a little bit later. Today, we're going to really explore what it means to be an influential expert in your field. Okay? I love this subject. I do. And let me tell you why. Because so often we all genuinely love what we do, right? We love the work that we do. We love serving people. But there are times where you want to grow. There's times where you want to stretch yourself. There's times where you want to kind of step out there differently. And it can be a challenge, right? Because the market is really, really filled at this time. But one of the biggest challenges that I'm always faced with when people come and talk to me is, okay, Kim, everybody says they're an expert. Everybody says they're this. So if I'm saying that, don't I sound just like them? How can I sound differently? And here's the thing. And this is why I want you to really hear what I'm going to share today. And hopefully it'll be helpful. I'm hoping it'll challenge you. I'm hoping it'll even inspire you to even look at some things differently. Being an expert is one thing, but being influential in how you lead and how you share information and how you step out there is something totally different. That's when you step into being a person of value. Okay? So let's kind of walk through it backwards. There is a study, and I'm sure many of you guys, if you've read Outliers, if you heard it, that talks about doing 10,000 hours towards any area will make you an expert. And when you look at that study, if you really kind of break apart that study, the person that he wrote that study about actually says that it wasn't so much that the violinists in the study did the 10,000 hours and they became experts. It wasn't that. Many of them, he said, actually didn't even complete the 10,000 hours. But the ones that did 20, 30, 40, those are the ones that emerged ahead of the pack. And if you take that into today's world, when you look at people, and I'm just going to throw out some names, when you look at Steph Curry, the late Kobe Bryant, when you look at Gayle King, when you look at Alex Guicelli, when you look at all these different people, you know their name, right? Because of the work level and because of the success that they had. But what we often don't see is the amount of hours that took to get to that point. Okay? So here's one of the first things I want you to think about or write down. Write down your areas of expertise. What is it that you really and truly want people to know your name? When they say your name, Lisa, when they say your name, Jane, when they say your name, Pam, Susan, whoever you are, when they say your name, what do you want them to say that is attached to you in your areas of expertise? That's the first thing. The second thing I want to challenge you on is look at what is it you're putting into developing. Because here's the thing. People who are expert in their respective areas are very deliberate in their practice. They're very deliberate in their effort. They're very deliberate in stretching outside the comfort zone, in challenging their skill sets, and challenging their mind. And more importantly, they're not just focused on or attaining knowledge. They're also very, very focused on application. Like, for example, I mentioned earlier, Steph Curry. What many people don't know is that he was traded a couple of times before he in the world even knew his name, really. Okay. But even before he made it to the NBA, he put in thousands of hours every single week, even as a kid, every single week, and shooting, to where he can literally shoot from any place on the court. He is known for that. And because he put in not 10,000 hours, but he put in, from what he has shared in his documentaries, way more than that, because he put deliberate practice, deliberate focus. He stretched himself out of his comfort zone and he kept stretching his skills. The same thing with anybody that's great in your respective industry. Look at what they're doing. And then ask yourself, am I putting in enough effort to really stretch my skills? Am I putting in enough time to really stretch my knowledge? Am I putting enough time to really and truly take what I know is a common practice in my field and try to change it up in a different way to teach people differently, to train people differently, maybe to walk with people differently? And let me give you an example why I say that is, here's the thing. One of the ways that people stand out the most is because they have such influence on what they say and how it can apply to multiple different people. And a lot of times people who are very good and influential in their expertise are able to take a simple concept and they can make it applicable in different ways to different people. Here's an example. I had a conference a few years ago, and I literally, in that room, I had about 55 people, and 5 of them were real estate agents, and all of them were saying, I need help with my marketing. One was introverted, one was very extroverted. One of them really and truly learned better by kinesthetic learning. So I knew when I saw her name on the conference at that day, I was excited because a lot of our conferences are not just sitting there listening for hours. I love to talk for a little bit, and then I like, let's action, let's put things to work, let's talk, let's move around. And I knew when I saw her name, I said, she's going to get it differently because she's kinesthetic learning. And then the other person is very much about stats and figures. So her learning style is different, right? So I can't stand before someone and teach one concept one way for one type of person, one type of learning, because then I can lose literally half the room. So I can take a concept, and I have studied, I have learned, and I found different ways on how this one thing can be heard differently amongst different learning styles. That's how I've chosen to take how I choose to teach marketing and how I tend to work with clients. So that way it never feels cookie cutter, because it can't be, right? And that has come through experience, that has come through trial and error, that's come to really honing, okay, how do I need to listen to a client? How do I need to do XYZ? And then really understanding the concepts and really understanding the new trends in marketing, which are changing every single day. But I constantly have to make sure that I'm learning, I'm growing, I'm staying ahead of the curve. I go to other industries, events. I try to make sure that I'm learning in different types of way so that I'm just not teaching one type of way. And I challenge you to do the same thing. Write down right now, again, how are you learning? And where are you getting that learning from? How are you challenging yourself? Write down those questions. And I want to challenge you to ask yourself that question, because you become influential in not just the gaining the information, but in the application of the information. That's where your influence grows. When people hear you, they see you. And more importantly, they see how you can take something and it feels like you're only talking to them. That takes skill. Okay? It takes skill. And to get that skill, obviously, you got to put it into practice, because you can be running a board meeting with all different types of personality. But if you're very skilled at learning how to manage a board, how to handle conflict resolution, how to make sure that when you're sharing information that could be a little bit dicey, if you're able to share it in a way that doesn't make people feel that it's dicey, like those type of things are skill set based, and those type of things are learned by application. And when you're able to do that consistently over and over is when you become influential as an expert. Last and final, if you're an expert in anything, and I probably say this almost on at least 80% of my podcasts, you got to look at your entry points and make sure that your blogs, your podcast, your newsletters, your books, your audiobooks, whatever it is that you're creating and doing, speaks to how you're learning information. Some of the most amazing books out there is repurposed content, but done better. And then someone else takes it and they do it better. So you can see they're constantly refining concepts, constantly refining ways to look at information, and they become a bestseller because people are hearing it differently. And they're taking something out of the gray and putting it literally into bright yellow, shining light. And it sounds differently. It comes off differently to people. And then people immediately say, I need to tune into that person because they're sharing information that I've never heard before, even though it may have been. That's when you know that you're growing in your influence. When the words that you share, the content that you share feels fresh, different, creative, challenging, inspiring, encouraging, whatever it might be to the audience that you're serving. So that's my last question to you to write down is check your entry points, but more importantly, check your content and ask yourself, am I sharing information that sounds like an expert? Am I sharing information that makes people feel whatever it may be in your field? You may need to challenge people. You may need to help them to grow. You may be able to help them look at a new concept. Whatever it is that you are an expert in, ask yourself if your content is actually speaking to that. Because I don't mean just kudos. I don't mean just, oh my God, this is wonderful and great. But are they really taking it and feeling inspired to do something with it? Are you getting people that said, you know what? When I read this, or when I saw what you wrote about this and this tips, I took it, I applied it, and man, it made a world of difference. Like, are you getting some type of feedback in that way? That's when you know you're growing in influence. Okay. So please note, if you've read Outliers, I definitely think it's an amazing book. I really do. But I'm going to challenge you to go beyond the 10,000 hours. I'm going to challenge you to consistently put to constantly put yourself in a place where you are growing. Don't worry about the hours. Don't worry about any of that. Just constantly ask yourself, am I challenging myself? And if you're not, put yourself in that place. Think about the skills you need to grow, get outside your comfort zone, and really up your experience level, up your challenge level, okay? And that way you can really start becoming influential in what it is that you offer and what it is that you're sharing with your audience. So to recap, really be clear on your expertise, really be clear on what it is you're putting into your own self. If you find that you're very deficient in your growth area, it's time to up your game there. Look at the content that you're sharing. Is it really, truly expert type of information that really would challenge, encourage, help, whatever the category might be for you? Is it doing that for you? And last but not least, looking at everything you're doing. Does it truly represent who you feel you are as an influential expert in your field? Okay. So I hope this was helpful. I just wanted to challenge you to think about these things. I want to really encourage you to ask yourself those questions, because here's the thing. Whenever you want to get ahead, whenever you want to stand out, you got to be seen, heard, felt, and experienced differently. Okay? Thank you again for joining us for another podcast. Thank you for tuning in. And more importantly, thank you for your support. You can learn a lot more about what we're doing, what we're up to. You can sign up for a newsletter at www.behindherbrand.net.